What to do about plastic waste? Too often, plastic we use on a daily basis ends up as unsightly trash or litter along roadsides and in streams, and then ends up in the ocean where it injures or kills marine life. Is there too much reliance on plastic products, or are we just not responsible with the products we use? Is there a solution to our plastic waste problem? Tonight's live broadcast and live stream of insights on PBS Hawai'i start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawai'i. I'm Yunji Denise. We use plastic products every day. In many ways, plastics have made our lives easier. In some fields, plastics are essential, like the medical industry. But plastic products have also become a big problem in the form of waste. You don't have to look too hard to find it. Plastic waste is unsightly and harmful, and in the case of marine and bird life, it can be deadly. Is plastic itself the problem? Is it the user, or a combination of both? Our guests tonight include a representative from the Honolulu City and County Department of Environmental Services, a plastic bag manufacturer, and two representatives of organizations that are working to eliminate plastic waste from our environment. We look forward to your participation in tonight's show. You can email, call, or tweet your questions, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org and on the PBS Hawai'i Facebook page. Now to our guests. Michael O'Keefe is with the city's Department of Environmental Services, which, among other things, is tasked with educating the public on what is and is not recyclable. Duray Shin is a manager for Plastic Free Hawaii, a program under the Kokua Hawaii Foundation. Her organization helps to educate the community about the benefits of being plastic free and coordinates beach cleanups. Adrian Hong is the president of Island Plastic Bags Incorporated, a local family-owned company that manufactures plastic bags. And Raphael Bergstrom is the incoming executive of Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii. He was most recently the head of the Oahu chapter of the Surfrider Foundation. Both organizations support efforts to curb plastic waste. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for spending your Valentines with us. We appreciate that. Michael, I want to start with you. Just how much plastic waste are we producing here in Honolulu, and what is happening to it?
So plastic waste does comprise a significant portion of our waste stream. I'm happy to say that we, in the City and County of Honolulu, we do recycle a lot of that plastic, particularly the high-value, high-grade plastic number 1 and 2 containers. The plastics that don't get recycled, as with the rest of municipal solid waste generated on Oahu, goes to the city's waste H-Power facility. It's a waste-to-energy facility, where the plastics, along with all the other trash, is burnt to generate electricity.
When we think about where the plastic is going, though, with that recycling, it's not happening here at home.
That's right. We collect, the city collects plastic from its curbside Blue Cart container program. We deliver it to a central processor that separates the material in the Blue Cart, including the plastic, into the individual material types. That material, in plastic's case, that material is baled, loaded into shipping containers, and then sent overseas to an end user market.
Raphael, I want to bring you into the conversation here. How has the plastic bag ban impacted what you're seeing in terms of the waste here on island?
It's definitely a start to being effective. We definitely see a lot less bags in storm drains, on the beaches, in the oceans. But I think that it's just a small piece to a bigger picture of what we're trying to get at. Is plastic waste is more comprehensive than just plastic bags, but bags are an easy beginning because there's an alternative. Everybody actually has the opportunity to bring their own bag and not use plastic bags in stores. But it's a helpful start, and it's getting the conversation going about how we can continue to go down the line and move towards eliminating more single-use plastics.
And what do you think is the next step?
I mean, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. Polystyrene foam is one that we can definitely get rid of right now. There's a lot of buzz about straws and utensils and things like that. All of these different things that are truly a single-use plastic that we use once, maybe for 5 to 10 minutes, and then get rid of and discard, which is kind of a strange thing to do considering the plastics are made out of fossil fuels and the industry of them is contributing to climate change as well. So I think all of those low-hanging fruit of things that we do use once and throw away, there are alternatives too, and we can move forward with getting rid of them out of our waste streams.
Dory, I know that you're doing a lot of beach cleanups. Tell us what you see out there in our environment.
Well, you know, most of the things that we find on the beaches, we say between 90 to 100% actually is commercial fishing gear when it comes to things washing ashore on our coastlines, which is what we see on the windward side of our islands. But, you know, in beaches like Magic Island and, you know, maybe the west side, like things that, beaches that are not on the windward side, you are finding a lot of food packaging, utensils and things like that that are either being littered or are blowing out of trash cans. And so we, you know, the opportunity we have here is really to address single-use plastic. So like Raphael said, does it make sense and is it ethical to produce products that we know are only going to be used for 10 minutes when we know they last a lifetime if they end up in the environment? And that's really what we're trying to tackle, is how do we create products that, you know, match what they're designed for.
Since the bag ban has gone into effect, are you seeing fewer bags when you do these cleanups?
Yeah, we definitely see way fewer bags. We're finding a lot of styrofoam, and then we find a lot of utensils and bottle caps and things like that.
Adrian, where do you come into this conversation? I know that you produce plastics, but a lot of what you're using are recyclable materials to get there in the first place. Tell us about that.
So yeah, a majority of our trash liners are made from recycled material. It just makes sense to use that material to make trash liners out of them. We sell trash liners to the state, City and County of Honolulu, other counties, bars, restaurants, hotels, hospitals, nursing homes. So everybody needs something to contain trash, especially like hospitals for biohazard materials. So that's what we provide.
Where do you think the place is for plastics? As you know, so much of the conversation is about eliminating plastics. Tell us about what the benefits are. Where do we actually need to keep these materials in our daily lives?
So there are a lot of benefits. That's why it's so popular, is because it's such a useful material. So definitely in the medical industry, there's a huge need to make sure that biohazard material stays inside the bag. IVs, scalpels, you name it, need to be in that, need to be in plastic to protect it, to make sure that it isn't contaminated. You know, plastic in automobiles, if you're gonna reach fuel mile per hour limits and stuff like that, you need to put more plastic into a vehicle than metal, so that it's more fuel efficient. Airlines, there's a lot of uses for plastics. It's just making sure that you weigh the benefits and costs of that use.
You know, when we talk about, let's go back to the user in this situation. When I have a plastic bottle and I either recycle it or throw it away, let's talk about where that is actually going. If we could get a little deeper into that, we think about we're doing the right thing if we throw that bottle or can into the blue bin, but that's not always the case.
Sure. So if you have a blue cart at your home and you put a plastic bottle in there, it'll, as I explained before, it'll go to a central processor here in Oahu, get baled and sent overseas. Formerly, most of that material was going to China about 1.5 years ago, but China has passed internal regulations that in a number of different ways restrict the amount of foreign waste that it allows into the country. It's resulted in other markets for that waste popping up in Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia. And so those markets are less profitable for local recyclers, so it's made recycling economically anyway a little bit more difficult. On the trash side, if you were to put that, taking a step back to the home again, if you were to put that plastic bottle in the gray cart in your trash, or any trash on Oahu for that matter, goes to the city's waste to energy facility, the H-Power facility, and it's processed there to generate electricity.
You know, I had the opportunity to go to H-Power last year, and it was very interesting just to see how that whole process works, that they're just burning everything. And what was interesting when I was talking to one of the people who was working there, he said that he actually doesn't do that much recycling, that he thinks it's better to burn it because in the end, we're not shipping it to some unknown destination where you don't know where it ends up. What do you think about that? I mean, should these materials be recycled? Are we better off burning them?
I think there's a line somewhere. I think that H-Power has a place on Oahu to burn the material, the difficult to recycle materials, the materials that don't make much sense to recycle. H-Power, I'll also mention too, does a fair amount of recycling itself. It pulls out about 20 to 25,000 tons of metal a year that get recycled, both prior to incineration and after incineration at H-Power. So, yeah, H-Power does have a purpose. You just have to really dial down to what material type we're talking about as to whether or not it makes both environmental and economic sense to send it overseas, which is has quite a large environmental footprint. So, bailing the stuff up and sending it overseas versus just keeping it on island for local energy production. You really have to look at the individual material type.
We have calls coming in, and we definitely want to include you in the conversation, so keep those coming. Glenda on Molokai has a question for you, Raphael. She wants to know how to address the microplastics in our sand.
Oh yeah, it's the challenge that we're all trying to figure out and work on too. Sustainable Coastlines for a while has been doing a sand sifter challenge over the years of trying to create innovation within our communities of what is the best technology to get it out of the sand. And it's a struggle. I mean, some of it is so small that it falls through even the smallest grade sifters. There's been some work recently done where using a water technology where it actually floats the microplastics up to the top of the water, and that's really cool and an interesting move in that direction because you can then just scoop it right off the top of the water. You can actually see that in the little gyres that you see in a tide pool or something like that too. Most of that microplastic is floating to the surface. But it's going to be something that we're dealing with for decades as the plastics continue to come in out of the ocean and be in the sand, that we need more and more people out there with small sifters doing the work and hopefully more innovation coming out with it too.
I mean, the question, it's really for both of you. When we are seeing those microplastics, are those generated locally or are those coming from overseas?
Most of it's coming from overseas. Marine debris, comes from the ocean. So a lot of ocean activity, commercial fishing being the primary one, and countries often without waste pickup, like we are lucky to have here. But we still have issues here that we can address. So what can we address here? And just to point to some of the things we were talking about, a lot of the discussion that often is happening globally and locally is what do we do once we already have the trash? And what we're trying to shift the conversation to is how do we reduce the trash, right? Instead of reacting, right? How do we be proactive? And we all learned the 3 R's when we're in school: reduce, reuse, recycle. And it's in that order on purpose, because reduce is really the most proactive, beneficial one for the planet. And recycling is a reaction with all these consequences and complexities. So the simplest thing we can do is reduce it at the source, right? Producers are a part of that, consumers are a part of that, cities are a part of that. And so we're trying to shift the consciousness there, and there's something called the waste berg. And if you think about the Titanic, there's the iceberg, and you can only see the top. And that's what you see when you get the bottle from the store and you throw it in your recycling bin or your trash can. But the reality is that for every 1 pound of waste created, there's about 70 pounds of waste created in the process of extraction, processing, right? There's a whole process before a bottle or anything gets to you. And so really zooming out of our reality of getting the material and throwing it out and thinking, what is the impact beyond just what I see? And how does that impact people, the planet, and the communities that I live in?
It just feels so daunting, if you will. What are some tips that you would suggest? What's something that the user can do right away on that reduction scale to make an impact?
I think you look at your own life. You look at your trash can. What is it overflowing with? Is it primarily food packaging? Is it bottles? What's the least necessary items that you're using that you're throwing away? right? And the least necessary items are the ones that are easiest for us to change. And then really, when you're ready, getting engaged in policy and shifting things on that governmental level.
You know, Michael, you had an interesting point before we got started talking about the choices that you make in the grocery store. Tell us, what is something that you can do right away as a consumer to lessen that impact?
Yeah, just kind of to dovetail on what DeRay is saying, consumer habits are really important, and a really important way to minimize the amount of waste in the waste stream. If we didn't have the waste to begin with, we wouldn't be talking about all these problems now that are resulting from having to deal with it. But I think consumer habits is number one. And also a big thing that needs to occur is producers, manufacturers need to take more responsibility for the entire life cycle of the product that they're producing. Right now they manufacture it and they sell it, but they have no ownership in its entire life cycle. Like, for example, what happens when it gets disposed, and some things that are manufactured are quite difficult to dispose. So if the manufacturer has no buy-in in the disposal process, then there's no incentive for them to manufacture it in a way that affects easy disposal.
We were talking earlier about H-Power, and Renee in Makiki has a question. When we burn plastic at H-Power, do we make emissions that are harmful to the environment?
So H-Power does have emissions. It has a very sophisticated emissions control system that scrubs out all of the hazardous and harmful materials. There is carbon emissions, but generally speaking, there's no hazardous emissions coming from the stacks, the smokestacks.
I'd love to jump in on that a little bit too, though, just because, I mean, in talking about H-Power as an end-of-life destination, and we start thinking about it as people like to include it in our renewable energy portfolio, I mean, it's quite the opposite. H-Power is the exact opposite of renewable energy. We're burning essentially a different type of fossil fuel when we're talking about plastics and creating energy from it. However, the statistics that we're learning about right now is that H-Power actually produces 3 times the emissions of burning oil at the Kahe oil plant and is on par about in emissions level with a coal plant. So the end of life is not clean. While it may be able to scrub out some of the dioxins and things that come with burning plastics, the greenhouse gas effect in a world of climate change is actually quite heavy with H-Power.
The thing is, with H-Power, you know, the alternative is landfill, right? So isn't H-Power a better solution than, you know, we are on an island, we only have so much space. We don't really have a lot of landfill space.
Yes, and I mean, again, that's a good reason to stop using the items that we're throwing away or that we're using once and throwing away. Source reduction is absolutely the solution to those problems. But when it comes to plastics, in all reality, plastics are more inert when they are buried and release less toxins when they're not burned. So even in a landfill, plastics are actually producing less toxins than they would be if they're burned.
Mm-hmm. And just to jump in, if you think about an average waste stream in America, almost half tends to be organic material, which is food waste, food scraps, cardboard, paper, and all of that stuff is compostable. So when the city, you know, develops a plan and is ready to launch a food recycling, food waste composting program, we could really reduce the amount that's going into these end-of-life options, whether it's landfilling or incineration. And so our goal in the environmental field is really how do we maximize reduction, and then how do we maximize diversion, right?
Do you see that as an option? I know that a lot of municipalities on the mainland do have composting. San Francisco is one that's very successful in that. Is that something that the city would consider?
So the city does have a contract for composting right now. We deliver and compost about 85 to 90,000 tons of green waste and yard waste, just yard clippings and stuff like that. So folks currently are able to put in garden fruits and veggies, what we call kind of pre-consumer food that happens to fall off your tree or you pick out of your garden. The program does not accept post-consumer food or food that comes from the kitchen. The city's position on that is kind of what we've been talking about already, has been to educate folks on, first of all, don't create the food waste to begin with. Buy only what you need and eat what you buy. If food waste can't be avoided, then donate it. You can give it away. There's several local nonprofits who are doing great work in repurposing what we call quality edibles to various social service agencies. So that's been the city's position.
Adrian, I wonder, is there such a thing as environmentally friendly plastic?
So there are exciting things that are happening as this is becoming a problem. There are people developing new technologies. There is a scientist at Adam Feinberg in University of Illinois, and he was developing self-destructing plastics. They're looking at polymers that, if they're exposed to light, a certain type of light or a certain type of trigger, it'll automatically break down into its component polymers and stuff like that. We use an additive that, when it goes into a landfill, plastics biodegrade. Microorganisms help the plastic biodegrade and stuff like that. But all this technology depends on different environments. Like, so the compostable things that people have, those compostable containers that they want to replace the foam containers with, they really biodegrade in composting facilities. They're not really meant to go into landfills. The technology we use to make biodegradable trash liners, under testing conditions, they biodegrade about 49% in 900 days and stuff like that, are meant to go to a landfill because they take much longer to biodegrade. Those polymers are very interesting, and they're not commercially viable yet, but then you have to figure out what the trigger is going to be. Is it going to be a yellow light? Is it going to be, what's the trigger that breaks down the plastic into something else? And you don't want the trigger to be triggered too early before the use of the plastic. And you want it to be triggered when it's ready to be disposed of and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's a lot of new technologies coming out, but they're all very new, and they all have their benefits and minuses.
We have a caller here who says that he has accumulated bags of heavy-duty cottage cheese containers. When he called Meadow Gold about where to recycle these containers, they didn't know. So the caller's looking for advice. What should we be doing with things like that?
Oh man, I mean, again, we'll keep coming back to it, is reduction. But at the same time, if you can find your own reuse for them, there's so many things that we just discard without thinking about maybe there's something we can do with this. So, I mean, there's a lot of places in stores, you could go to Down to Earth or Whole Foods and go to the bulk aisles there and use your old Meadow Gold containers to refill it with something else, even detergents, things like that are sold in bulk. And I think that's where we need to, like Mike was talking about, is move our producers and the actual businesses to allowing more of that bulk refill so that we can reuse the containers that are already in existence while new technologies are coming out that aren't so heavy on plastics. And then we get that into our minds that reduction and reuse is really the way to go.
Yeah, and zero waste stores are, really trending across the country and the world. And so these are stores where it's 100% bulk, or bamboo toothbrushes sold without packaging, right? And so you go into the store, you're prepared to shop, you bring all your mason jars or reusable containers and bags, and you fill up everything you need, all your staple food and household products, and you literally leave without having accumulated additional waste. And those opportunities, those places aren't quite available and accessible here yet, but like Raphael said, health food stores all have bulk options for most of your primary needs. And so just shifting, our market and knowing that every dollar we spend is a vote, right? So how do we incentivize businesses to move towards that kind of a model?
The one thing I did want to add is one thing we could do is change how we package things, because right now you could get up to 7 layers in some kind of like food packaging. 1 layer is for clarity, 1 layer is for print, 1 layer is like a foil aluminum, 1 layer is for barrier protection and stuff like that. So we're used to packaging that looks super pretty and super, and it is pretty, and it does a lot of different things to protect the food or protect. But you could design the packaging in such a way that it's much easier for Michael and his friends to recycle. Even I take, if I have plastics that I, pull apart for a computer part or whatever, I recycle them in my facility and stuff like that because we have a recycler on premises. But there's certain packaging that makes it very difficult to recycle. They're putting like sticker labels on it, or they're doing things to it, or they're putting some kind of metal inside the plastic that makes it basically unrecyclable for us. So there's a lot of things that we could do just in terms of packaging for all types of stuff that would make it easier on manufacturers and recyclers to reuse that stuff and recycle that stuff.
Pamela in Hilo has a question about our waste stream directed at you, and that says some countries that take our recycled material, i.e. Malaysia, have illegal dumps. Are we contributing to these nasty practices when we ship our plastics out into the world market?
Good question. The honest answer is I'm not sure. I can comment on the reason that China stopped taking the world's recyclables about 2 years ago was that it was having an adverse environmental impact for them. So they made their standards more strict, for their import standards more strict. They tightened up their regulations. Actually had the effect of really blocking off all of the world's waste, all foreign waste that was coming into China. That waste has now been diverted, as we talked about, to these Southeast Asian markets, who I understand are kind of overwhelmed with having to deal with the influx that was formerly going to China. So, yeah, it's a fair question.
And when you go to the grocery store and you're choosing a beverage, tell us, what do you choose? What kind of container, what kind of packaging do you look for?
So if I don't bring my reusable tub, I'll look for an aluminum container. Aluminum containers to me are the most sustainable type container if I have to purchase something new.
And the interesting thing, and we were talking before the show started about glass. When you think about glass, to me it seems like a very clean material. It's physically appealing. It seems to have a better reputation than plastic. But you were saying that it's actually it's a bigger environmental challenge. Glass
is very challenging, and I'll just kind of preface this by saying that recycling in Hawaii is challenging. Period. The industry's kind of handicapped here because we don't have any local end user processors. We don't have any local markets. Everything that we collect for recycling, with the exception of green waste and some small things that companies like Adrian's are doing, everything has to go overseas to get recycled. And so the cost of shipping that material overseas is high. Glass in particular, because of how much it weighs. Recyclers locally, I think I can say with confidence, are not completely happy about having to take glass. It's, like I said, it's heavy when it breaks during collection, or when it breaks on the tip floors at their facilities. It's harsh, it's corrosive on their equipment, it's dusty. And then when it gets to the end user, right now all of the glass that we collect on Oahu, and I think in the state, actually goes to California, a facility in California. When it gets to that facility, there's quite an extensive process that it needs to go through, cleaning, breaking down further, that it needs to go through before it can be actually repurposed or reused for something else.
So aluminum is light, easier to recycle.
Yeah, it has a higher commodity value, which is key in recycling. It's worth a lot more than glass.
Rafael, let's talk about some of the measures that the legislature is considering. You said plastic bags were the first step. What are the next steps?
There's a few that are going on right now. I think that one of the bills, Senate Bill 522, is one of the really important ones because it's looking more holistically at the problem. It's trying to phase out a lot of different single-use plastics over time, but then also look how can we get at some of the more challenging things. So it works on polystyrene foam, straws, utensils, bags, the rest of the bags that are still out there outside of just at the checkout counters. And then also creates a plastic-free working group. So the idea is to engage the whole community in a conversation, the House, the Senate, the counties, the actual manufacturers, the community members that are working on this, to start discussing how do we actually eliminate plastic packaging. Because right now the answers for that are not particularly obvious, and we, as Adrian was talking about, so much is over-packaged. So how do we start at least reducing the over-packaging and move forward with this zero waste plan, if you will, over time, and really have a 10-year plan of this idea of source reduction that we're really talking about. But it gives us time, it gets rid of the things that we have immediate ability to get rid of now, and then works on the more complicated things as we move on.
How do we actually do that, given that so much of what we're consuming is shipped in? We can't necessarily say, hey, factory so-and-so, we're not taking your items because they're packaged in this way. I mean, what does that actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, we do have to start challenging the producers of that. And I think that Hawaii has a particular place in this discussion because we are getting the brunt of the world's plastic on our shores. And so we have to start being a leader. And you're right, maybe we can't say you can't ship it in that way, but stores do have the opportunity to say we're not going to carry certain types of products if they're overpackaged. Costco could be a leader in something like this in reducing the amount of package. I mean, the reality of it is I'd just like to share some numbers of what we're really looking at here. There's been 8.3 billion metric tons of plastic produced in the history of the world, most of that within the last 50 years. Only 9% of that is recycled, and about 80% ends up in landfills or in the environment. These are all things made out of fossil fuels, all things that are contributing to climate change. If we continue on that path, of the fossil fuel budget, 20% of the global fossil fuel budget will be used on plastic by 2050. So when we're talking about why we're needing to reduce and really challenge the producers, this is really why. This is a global problem that is really going to be affecting our lives.
What kind of a difference can Hawaii make?
I mean, I really do think that we can be a leader because, like I said, we are the canary in the coal mine, and the canary is pretty much dead already. And we need to be the ones that are speaking to the world that says we're not going to accept this plastic anymore because we see the detriments both to our tourism industry, to the animals that are out there, and to our human health eventually. I think there's going to be a lot more studies coming out about the problems with that. And it's just, we also have to look, when we're talking about some of the plastics going to markets like Malaysia or Southeast Asia or China, is we like to kind of pass blame into that area because maybe some of the loop is coming back to Hawaii here. But in the reality, while 50% of production is split between North America, Europe, and Southeast Asia, 95% of the companies that are running the plastics industry are US-based or European-based, led by Dow Chemicals, and they're the ones that have the plants in these other places, and then we're sending our garbage over to there where they can't really handle it and it's coming back to us. So Hawaii has a chance to start calling that out and say, we're gonna be the leader in stopping this problem at its source.
You know, whenever we have these conversations about legislation, the styrofoam ban, the plastic bag ban that first went into effect, a lot of small businesses say this is deadly to them, that this is going to, small mom and pop food trucks or local restaurants say, like, if we don't have styrofoam containers, we can't continue to function. Adrian, I know that, given your role in supplying plastic bags to a lot of companies, what do you hear from people in your field in terms of how this would impact them?
In terms of foam containers?
Foam containers and and banning more plastics.
So in terms of foam containers, it'd be difficult. The compostable versions are much more expensive than and that's why the expanded foam polystyrene ones are so popular, is that they're much cheaper and easier to use. They don't melt when things get hot. They don't drip when there's wet items in it. So functionally, the expanded foam polystyrenes a lot easier to use, a lot more cost effective. So it is a burden. Whether they're able to handle that'll depend on the business. Some are better at getting their customers to understand what's happening and able to charge more to pass that cost along, and some people may not be. So there will be businesses that are affected by it. And it may not be a huge effect on just that, but then they have other problems that they have to deal with too that add to their costs and stuff like that. So that may be the one thing that's just a little bit too much.
And can I just share that all iterations of a polystyrene foam ban do include a financial hardship exemption. So any businesses that do find that they can't And we found that it's a 5 to 15% difference per container, right? So it's not the several times more that is often cited by the industry. But if there is a financial hardship for these really small businesses, they can claim an exemption from having to comply. And there's over 200 counties in the U.S. that have successfully banned polystyrene foam without much impact on the economy. And there's, Surfrider Foundation has their ocean-friendly restaurants Hawai'i program, which has 200 restaurants certified in the state of Hawaii that are practicing ocean-friendly practices. And the main requirement for that is that there's no polystyrene foam in their operations, which means we already have a huge movement of voluntary businesses switching from foam to compostable and other more eco-friendly options.
Why do you think there is that resistance? Do you think it's a lack of knowledge? I mean, a lot of these businesses would say, hey, I'm operating on a really thin margin here, and so that 5 to 15 cent difference actually does matter to me.
And I think if it does matter, I sympathize with that. I work with a lot of businesses, and I know that the margins are really tight, especially in Hawaii. And so I think it's really important that we are emphasizing, we have that compassion with that exemption, that please take that if that's something that you need, but I think that there is also a lack of information in terms of how abundant the alternatives are, and that every single distributor in Hawaii, whether they use styrofoam or don't, has an option for compostable paper and other alternatives to polystyrene foam. So whatever distributor you're going to, you can find an equivalent alternative.
We have two calls here from the medical field. They're very interesting. One says, caller worked in the medical field for decades and remembers when bedpans and other equipment was made from steel and could be sanitized through steam. Why can't the medical field return to steel and eliminate plastic waste? Another caller is a dental hygienist and sees how much plastic waste is disposed on an hourly basis for patients. Dental offices is bound by OSHA rules to dispose of every plastic item due to hazardous waste. What does the panel think? I mean, what can we do? Do we go back to materials that were used in the past?
I mean, I think for a lot of things in our lives, we can go back to materials that are used in the past. I'm challenged by the medical field as well, as this is one of those things that I think the conversations need to continue, because as Adrienne said, plastics have a place in our world at the same time, and we have to understand the value in using them in very specific locations and not just willy-nilly using plastics. So the medical field, the amount of people that we have on the planet and probably going into hospitals, we have to have some sort of levels of sanitation. So I think that maybe there's new technologies that come out, even bioplastics in the medical field. Can we use plant-based plastics in the medical field as we move forward? For now, I would much rather focus in on the things that we really do have a control over, and those are the things more in our day-to-day lives. And
I think the caller makes a good point that everything we use plastic for, we used to not, right? And almost all of the things we used to use as instead were reusable alternatives. And I think the medical industry is not one we like to focus on because it's not a low-hanging fruit. But if people remember, I wasn't around for it, but the milkman model, right? And how you get the glass and then they pick it up. And it would obviously be modernized, but how do we use, that kind of a consciousness and remember that plastic is not necessary because in a lot of ways, because we haven't had it for that long, right? Our grandparents didn't use plastic for most of the things it's used for now. So what are the things in which we're only using it for convenience, right? And are we gonna continue to choose convenience over our future, or are we willing to innovate, right? And look towards solutions to eliminate the unnecessary versions of it.
That being said, I doubt anybody would want to be stuck with a hypodermic needle that's been used before, even if it could be sanitized.
For sure.
The medical field is very difficult. I would,
And to your point on the milkman, the caller remembers glass containers like Coke and milk bottles that were returned to the bottling company, sanitized and reused. Why can't we return to those practices? Is there a place for that here in the islands, given that, we don't have a local bottling plant here? We don't, the beverages that are made on island, they're not bottled here other than some aluminum. Can that actually happen here?
I think absolutely. I mean, I think DeRay hit it right on the head. I think the next step is going to be a combination of innovation for materials that are products that can't be reused, but also this whole modern milkman model. Some materials across industries, I think it's appropriate for them to be reused. We're talking just before the show about a brewing company in Oregon that has resorted back to the milkman model. Manufacturing brewing beer and putting it in a sturdier container, one that could withstand multiple use, dropping off at somebody's home, picking back up by the manufacturer, and continuing to use it. A lot of these things that, beyond plastics, a lot of these products that we use just for one use have the capabilities to have a much longer life.
And if I can just give a shout out to a local company that does do this, Sky Kombucha has all glass containers. And in fact, they actually have kombucha on tap at most of their retail locations if you do bring your own container. But if you don't, when you buy your glass bottle of kombucha, there's a 25-cent deposit on it when you check out. And then you can get that quarter back every time you return any number of bottles. And because they go to the same retail locations, when they drop off new product, they pick up the glass bottles, their facilities out in Waimanalo, and they actually do refill it. And so there are companies that are passionate about this and looking for ways to be part of the solution.
I mean, 25 cents is a pretty big incentive. Is
Right.
that the way to go? Do we charge people more for what they're using? Please go ahead.
It definitely has to be a change of behavior, because I've been to other cities, like Seattle, where it's like if you throw a can away in the trash, everybody looks at you. So it definitely has to be a behavior change. You have to get people to recycle more in terms of the recycling program now. There could be a lot more material that is diverted and stuff like that. So you definitely have to create that culture where it's like, oh, think about it before you throw it away.
I think that's really important too. The idea of convenience is what's killing us right now too. Is we want our lives to be so convenient, but we don't take the time to actually look at the consequences of that type of convenience. And we talk about a few cents here and there for polystyrene container alternatives. We also have to ask ourselves too, is it really worth selling our children's future of destroying our planet so that we can save a few cents here and there? And I hope that people ask themselves that. And really what DeRay was talking about, when we're talking about that 1 ton versus 70 tons in the production process, is we have to start thinking about the full life cycle of a product and not just think, oh, this is nice, I can get it once and throw it away and I don't have to do the dishes. That model, I think, has to really end. And it is a behavior change thing. It's really getting our community together on these issues and understanding that together.
What are some practical things? What are some things that you do in your daily life that you think that people who are watching this program could adopt right away that would make a difference? We all know bring your own tumbler when you get a cup of coffee or water or what have you, but what are some other things that we can actually implement immediately?
I think that those are the simplest starting points is water bottles. Bring your own Tupperware if you go out to dinner, so that if you have leftovers, you don't need to take the foam container or any type of container. You have your reusable container. Utensils, like with Surfrider Foundation, we have the Ocean Friendly Restaurant bamboo utensil kits that clip onto your belt or onto your backpack or wherever you want to go. So again, it's those little things that really do start to add up over time, because it is that change of mindset that's really going to shift the tide. And it can extend into things like food waste, like we were talking, is I separate out my scraps at home of my food waste on my kitchen counter. I have a worm bin at home, which is really easy to manage. I have chickens in my backyard. They love everything in there. And even those compostable containers, if I put them in a worm bin, it does not take a commercial grade composting facility to break them down. They break down in a month.
Yeah.
That's so interesting, the idea of bringing your own container, your own Tupperware to a restaurant. I think the first time I did that, I might be a little bit embarrassed, but it actually makes a lot of sense.
And it saves the business money.
Right.
So they're like,
Exactly.
sure, no problem.
Tell us about what you do. What are some practical tips that you have for people who are watching?
I think, and the key is nobody's perfect, right? And there's times in my life where I was more plastic free than I am now, right? And so we go in waves, but I make sure I don't buy any water bottles in plastic. I always have my flask with me. I always have my utensil set with me. And I try to make sure there's 3 utensils in there so that if I'm with friends, they can borrow them. And I try to bring my own container when I leave the store, and bags. So those are my commitments, right? And there's much more you can do in addition to that. So I would just say, pay attention to where you have the opportunity. You might be really good at bringing your bottle and bag, but you're not quite there with the utensil. And maybe start there.
Okay. On the recycling side, I got to call my mom out on this. She's an aspirational recycler. Oh, no. So she puts everything that she thinks ought to be recycled into the bin because she thinks that this is really nice quality plastic. This really should be taken care of.
She's not the only one.
We call that contamination.
Right. So that is actually hurting the process. Tell us about that.
It doesn't help the process. So when we collect recyclables in the blue cart, the curbside blue cart, I mentioned it goes to a central processing facility. It's all commingled, obviously. So there's probably what's best described as a semi-automated process for separating the material into individual material types. The very first stage of that process is a conveyor belt that runs in front of a couple of workers who hand pick out all of the contamination, all of the material that might look like it's recyclable, but if it's not a 1 or 2 plastic, if it's not newspaper or cardboard or a glass bottle and jar or aluminum container, we can't include it in the bale with the stuff that we are actually supposed to collect. So that stuff is hand pulled out, put into a contamination bin with all the other rubbish, and it's sent to H-Power with all the rubbish.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's
don't be an
part-
aspirational recycler.
That's part of the changing the behavior too, because like you'll go to Whole Foods and you see people throwing things in the wrong, definitely in the wrong, especially when it gets full in one, they just throw it right in the next bin over. So that's something like, make sure that, there are people that have to separate that stuff out later. You're not, you're not doing anybody any favors by just throwing it in the next container over. Make sure that it's going in the right place, and it's a huge undertaking to recycle things. It's not easy. It's washing, sorting, remelting it down, repurposing it, and stuff like that. So, I mean, the easier you make it on the recycler, the better things are.
I'll mention too that in a really difficult market environment like we have right now with China not taking pretty much any of the world's recyclables, it's become that much more important that people recycle properly, because the markets that do exist are kind of following China's suit, quite honestly. They've become inundated with material, so they can become quite selective in the material that they want to accept and recycle. And that material, they like to be virtually contaminant-free. So it starts at the curb, it starts at the home. People who if you make sure that you're recycling only what's supposed to go into the blue cart, it makes it that much more easier, the whole process that much more easier from start to finish.
And that's something that we've done a lot with Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii too, is waste diversion. And we've worked with the Vans Triple Crown for the last few years. And really, it's really about trying to teach the community how to separate the trash out. So we have people stationed at the different sorting stations there and actually helping guide people through. It's like, this can be composted, this can be recycled, this is gonna go to trash, and then work with a local farm to move the compost into an effective end of life and get the recyclables to the proper places.
On a larger scale, we talked about our individual commitments, but as a community, what needs to happen next?
I think we have to commit to this idea of source reduction, and that right now Hawaii is producing double the national average in waste.
Why is that?
It's so hard to know. I mean, I think.
That's just a striking statistic.
It is
Is it because we have so many visitors that are using single-use items in the tourism industry, or where does that come from? Is it local folks who just don't have awareness? Where is that coming from?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I think the visitor industry produces a lot of waste, but I also think that it's the culture of these polystyrene containers, things that have been phased out in other municipalities all over the country, are still persisting here. And so there's just a little bit of a slowness of awareness on what the actual problem is. I mean, the U.S. produces double the amount that China produces in terms of waste per capita as well. So it's not just Hawaii, it's our whole economy that we've kind of created in this Western world of that. We don't really care that much about our trash. And I think that this is really where it starts, is this awareness of understanding that this is part of this whole climate discussion. It's part of a much bigger thing that we really can focus in on changing our day-to-day habits. And by doing that, by understanding like where things are coming from, that's gonna get it in our minds that we really do need to make the changes.
I think it goes to this, like our waste and our economy, like everything is very linear, right? you have something and it gets thrown away, right? And so what nature, we're trying to protect nature and we're trying to live in harmony with nature. That's this whole issue with climate change, is that we're out of balance with nature. And nature doesn't work in lines, it works in circles, right? So how do we move back to circular economy, circular waste systems, where the things we use aren't seen as just commodities, but they're seen as a resource, right? Can they be nutritious, composted, returned to the earth, used again, right? And so I think there's a consciousness shift, whether it's you're a consumer, a human, or a business, or government, right? There's a consciousness shift that needs to happen from linear to circular.
Jan writes in saying, we used to be able to recycle plastic bags at area grocery stores, but those containers are now not there. Are there places where we can still recycle them? What should be happening to those plastic bags?
So I don't think there's any recycler on Hawaii that takes plastic scraps and recycles them locally. I don't know of any program that does that, where they send it to the mainland too.
Plastic film, the plastic bags, it's a relatively difficult material to recycle, so I would think that that's correct, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we recycle our scraps locally. We have a recycling machine on premises, so we don't waste anything. But we aren't really set up to accept post-consumer waste, clean it, because it usually needs to be cleaned because it's dirty, and then recycle it. We don't have the manpower for that.
When we talk about changing behavior, should we be washing out our stuff before we recycle it? Does that make any kind of a difference?
Not really. Generally, if the container is empty, the program can tolerate a certain amount of residual food waste that remains in food jars, or even a little bit of grease on the pizza box is okay. But if there's cheese stuck to the pizza box, or if there's still peanut butter all in the jar, then I wouldn't. I would probably try to clean it out a little bit more. Maybe there's still some stuff left in there to eat.
We have a number of questions, basically about penalties. One is Alama from Kailua says, can we put a huge tax on plastic water bottles? Another person was asking if we can, have the folks who are sending in these products from the mainland maybe make it harder for them to send those things with us. Are municipalities involved in this conversation? Raphael was talking about trying to change the behavior of the production. What's the city's role in that? What's government's role?
I'll just mention a small example of that is the High Five program that we have here in Hawaii. We're very fortunate to have that. It's resulted in a lot of recycling over the years. But that's an example of what we were talking about earlier in terms of extended producer responsibility, vesting more responsibility with the manufacturer in the ultimate disposal of the product that they're manufacturing. So any company that imports a beverage container into the state has to pay into a fund that eventually pays out to recyclers and consumers to subsidize the recycling of that container. So the High Five program, as it's called, is a great example of how industry is vested with that whole kind of responsibility for the life cycle of the entire product. And I think that model can certainly be extended to products beyond beverage containers.
We have just a few minutes left, so we want to give you all one opportunity to kind of weigh in one last time. We'll start with you. If we don't get a handle on this, what happens to our islands?
Well, I mean, I feel like I represent young people, and when I think about when I first learned about climate change and having such a deep connection to nature living in Hawaii, and I think many people in Hawaii have that at a higher rate than people in other places, it's an emotional and personal thing for me. And I think that we have a moral responsibility to do the right thing. And I think we talk a lot about money and politics, and those things are all part of it, but where's our moral compass here in our culture? And how do we start using that as a guidance point for making decisions? So I would like to see that happen more and more.
And how do we best get involved?
Oh, there's so many ways to get involved. I mean, this is what's exciting. Is like all these problems that we're talking about, they're problems that we created, so we also have the ability to uncreate them or to make change. So, I mean, all the organizations that we work with, Sustainable Coastlines, Surfrider Foundation, Kokua Hawai'i Foundation, we just started a new organization called Zero Waste Oahu, which is a hui of all those organizations together. I think that people can generate awareness by showing up at a beach cleanup, coming to testify on the bills, learning how to get involved in the testifying process, and really just talking to your friends and family. I mean, that's the biggest thing. That's what we're going to talk about when we talk about behavior change and really shifting this responsibility back to us. It's just us having conversations with each other.
Okay, we have less than a minute, and I want to get to both of you. What do you think is the best thing to support businesses to get to that place where we are using more recyclable materials, where we are more environmentally friendly?
So if it starts with the consumer, like we've talked about, the businesses will respond to that. So if people are saying, like, you know, I only want plastic straws if I ask for it, businesses will respond to that. Instead of giving out straws every time, they'll just give them out when they're being asked and stuff like that. So I think if people start making that change, businesses will respond to that.
Okay, in less than 20 seconds, how do we support our city on this?
By really just effectively participating in the programs, making sure that you're recycling the right material, making sure that all of the recyclable material does go into the blue cart, and making sure that that you're helping your neighbors, your friends, your family all do the same thing. Really good, solid participation with low contamination rates will help the industry.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you all for being here. Mahalo to all of you for joining us tonight. Of course, we thank our guests, Michael O'Keefe with the City and County Department of Environmental Services, Adrian Hong, President of Island Plastic Bags Incorporated, Duray Shin, a manager for Plastic Free Hawaii, and Raphael Bergstrom, the incoming executive of Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii. Next week on Insights, we're talking about prison reform. What does that look like? What has to change? And how do we do it? I'm Yunji Denise for Insights on PBS Hawaii. A hui ho.